I'm 28 now, financially independent, and I like the quiet. That's probably the biggest change. My apartment faces a courtyard where the only sound past 10 p.m. is an old elevator lifting someone up to a place where they can shut their door and be left alone. That silence used to feel like a void. Now it feels like a boundary I earned. I run a small but very profitable data consultancy. Translation: I crunch numbers, build dashboards for companies that never had time to track their own mess, and then invoice them for the privilege. I have a handful of contractors I bring in for bigger projects, and I keep the books obsessively clean because I'm allergic to debt. That's not an accident. Debt used to be the air I breathed. Here's the opening line I can't shake. You owe us everything. That was the soundtrack of my childhood. Not, we love you. Not, we're proud of you. It was the ledger. My parents wouldn't say, we're broke, or we're stressed in the normal way. It was always, do you think food pays for itself? Do you think the roof is free? Do you think your clothes fell off a truck? It wasn't even the words alone. It was how they said them. A sigh turned into a performance. My mother would stare at the ceiling like God was personally tired of financing my existence. My father would sit at the kitchen table with a legal pad, tapping the pen as if each tap was another dollar I was stealing. I knew numbers before I knew comfort. If I asked for a school field trip, the answer came with math. $35 for the bus, $8 for the museum, $5 for lunch, $48 for what? To look at dinosaur bones. You want us to pay $48 so you can stare at a dead lizard? Then he'd write 48 on the yellow pad and circle it, like it mattered to some future audit of my worth. I don't want to make them sound like cartoon villains. They made sure I had food, clothes, and a bed. They also made sure I knew those things were not gifts but investments, accruing interest, and that someday I would have to settle up. That word, settle, was their favorite. It floated through the house like a draft. Someday we'll settle. When you're grown, you'll settle. The way other parents talk about college or weddings, mine talked about the day I'd pay them back for the privilege of existing. There's this memory I keep like a rock in my pocket. I'm 7. I poured Cheerios into a bowl and the box slips. Half the cereal avalanche onto the counter and floor. I'm frozen, mid-disaster, little hands halfway to the cupboard to get a towel. My mother walks in, tight smile fading as she takes in the flakes of cereal around my bare feet. You think food grows back? She asks. She doesn't yell. She crouches to my eye level. Look at me. Her voice is soft, almost gentle. We work for this. I go to that job every day. Your father goes to his job every day. This is money. She grabs a handful of cereal and lets it fall. Money, money, money. Then she stands, leaves me with the crunch underfoot, and says, clean it up. And remember, all of this comes from somewhere. I cleaned it up. I remembered. By 9, I had the script memorized. If I turned on a light in a room and forgot to turn it off, I'd be called back from wherever I'd gone to flip the switch because, do you know what kilowatt hours cost? If I ate an extra slice of bread, my father would tally the loaf's price divided by slices, announce the cost to the family like it was a joke no one laughed at. That's 22 cents, he'd say, nodding, tapping the legal pad. It adds up. Sometimes I thought maybe this was just their way of managing stress. I would try to be patient. I learned to make myself smaller. I turned down invitations. I wore sneakers until my toes pressed uncomfortable half-moons into the rubber. I pretended hunger wasn't real, so I wouldn't ask for more. I tried to be low cost. That's a phrase I used for myself in my head, low cost. I reported my own cost to myself nightly, like a shift manager doing a petty cash check. The first time my father told me, explicitly, I'd have to pay them back was when I was 11. He was in the garage fixing something that didn't need fixing. He liked to handle tools when he was angry. The smell of oil felt like another kind of ledger. I stood there with a permission slip wrung like a towel in my hand. He didn't take it. You know, he said, pointing at the shelf full of mismatched jars. Your existence is not free. We talk about this, and you nod like a bobblehead. But you'll understand when you're older. There will come a day when you have a job, and you'll look back and say, they carried me. And when that day comes, you'll do the right thing. What's the right thing? I asked, because I was stupid enough to still want the answer that would make him smile. Pay us back. He said it as if it were saying, brush your teeth. He finally took the permission slip, glanced at the amount, and snorted. $10 to run the mile. I can run in place for free. Coach says. Coach can pay for it. He signed it anyway. Later, at dinner, he announced, we are $10 closer to the day you settle up. 11-year-old me laughed because I thought it was a joke. He didn't. My mother had her own tactics. She loved a moment of vulnerability like a fisherman loves a tug on the line. If I came home upset, she'd sit me down, smooth my hair, and say the comforting thing for exactly 2 seconds before she twisted the hook. "You're a good boy," she'd murmur. "We've put so much into you. So much." Her hand would pause. "That's why it hurts when we don't see the return." Return. As if love was a stock and I was underperforming compared to the S&P 500. Birthdays were the worst. Everyone else in my class got a party. We got a reasonable acknowledgement. My mother would bake a cake and cut it like she was rationing fuel during a war. Gifts were practical. Socks, a calculator, shampoo, and then came the toast. My father would lift his glass of Pepsi and say, "Another year we've put a roof over your head. May the years we put food on the table be repaid with interest." Everyone would laugh because when someone says something insane with a smile, you're supposed to laugh. It's not like they never said they loved me. They did, but it came wrapped in invoices. "We love you, which is why we sacrifice. We love you, which is why we expect accountability. We love you, which is why we will keep track." That last one is almost an exact quote. 12-year-old me stood in the hallway, listening, while they fought about a late bill. My father slammed a drawer. My mother said, "We have to keep track." He said, "We are." She said, "Of him too." They didn't notice me. I crept back to my room, lay on my bed, and stared at the ceiling, counting the specks in the popcorn finish like they were seconds in a sentence I hadn't earned the right to finish. The emotional toll was like a slow drip. I learned to disappear in public. No requests, no extra napkins, no refills, no seconds. Teachers called me mature. Adults praised me for being so considerate. What they meant was I had already internalized the math of existing. When I got the honor roll certificate in 8th grade, I hid it in my backpack. I didn't want to present another line item. My mother found it washing my clothes. She held it up, mascara wand paused midair, and said, "This will look good on scholarship applications. Keep it up. We can't afford to carry you forever." I know some people are rolling their eyes. All parents say stuff like that. Maybe they do. But there's a difference between reminding your kid that money is finite and treating their life as a running tab. There's a difference between accountability and a shakedown with a smile. If you've been there, you don't need me to draw a diagram. You hear it in the pauses. You feel it in the way your shoulders climb toward your ears whenever the mail gets dropped on the mat and someone pauses before opening a bill, as if paper itself had a temper. I got my first job at 14, under the table stocking shelves at the corner bodega. The owner paid me in cash and day-old pastries, which felt like theft and a feast at the same time. I hid the money in a library book I never returned. When my mother found out, not the money, just the job, she hugged me. For a second, I believed I'd finally done the right thing. Then she whispered, "Good. You're getting practice. Remember, someday you'll settle." From then on, any dollar I made came with commentary. "Don't forget to set some aside for your responsibilities," my father would say, tapping his temple like the ledger lived under his skin. If you're waiting for a single explosive moment, some night of screaming that made me pack a bag, that's not how it went. It was accretion. It was limestone laid one shell at a time until a cliff existed between us. When I look back, there were hundreds of moments that could have been the one. The night my mother held up a pair of shoes I'd outgrown and said, "You walk through money." The time my father refused to pick me up from a late practice because gas isn't free, and I walked home in the rain. The day they photocopied my report card and highlighted anything less than an A, then taped it to the fridge under a magnet that said Accountability Partners. The magnet had a smiley face. You might ask why I didn't tell a teacher, an aunt, someone. I did test the waters once. 9th grade, a school counselor asked how things were at home. I told her, carefully, that my parents talked a lot about money and how much I cost. She smiled in that counselor way and said, "Lots of families have money stress. I'm sure they're doing their best." I nodded. What I meant was, they're doing their math. What I learned was, this ledger was mine to carry. People will also ask, did they hit you? No. I wish sometimes they had, because bruises are easier to show. I would have preferred to present a purple mark and be told, "That's not okay," than to present my balance and be told, "That's normal." How do you quantify the way you learn to hold your breath when the UPS truck turns onto your street? How do you graph the slope at which love turns into a receipt? So here's who I am now. The kid who grew into a man who tracks everything because the only way to make the numbers shut up was to master them. I built a life where I choose when to switch the lights on. I buy bread without a lecture echo. I timebox my workday and no one taps a pen at me. But I'm telling this because earning calm is different than being free. I didn't feel free until last week. And to explain why last week felt like unlocking a door I didn't know was welded shut, I have to go back to the running tab, the yellow legal pad, and the word they taught me to fear and then to hold like a knife, settle. The first real bill I ever paid wasn't mine. I was 15 and had just cashed a week's worth of bodega shifts. $1.84, crumpled and sweet with the smell of cinnamon rolls that were technically trash. I hid the money under the insole of my sneakers. That night, my father called me to the kitchen like it was a performance review. Sit, he said. The legal pad was already out. The kitchen light hummed. He had written gas/elec/water across the top and a list of numbers down the left side that looked like a cliff face. We are behind, he said without looking at me. And you're old enough to help with your responsibilities. My mother had 2 mugs set out, tea bags steeping like soft flags. We're a family, she said, voice warm. Families share the load. I still remember how slowly I lifted my heel out of my sneaker, like I was pulling up a floorboard and expecting rot. I peeled the insole back in the other room, smoothed the bills, walked back in, and laid them in a row. My father didn't touch them. He just nodded like a judge and noted the amount on the pad. 84, he said. That's a start. He used the word start a lot. Start paying your share. Start taking accountability. Start building good habits. In my head, start turned into never stop. At school, I worked. Homework, honor roll, extracurriculars that didn't cost anything. Track, free. Debate, not free. Guess which one I did? At home, I worked more. Odd jobs my father invented, recalking the bathroom, inventorying the garage like we owned a store. At the bodega, I learned fast hands and quiet feet, and how to count a till without looking like you were counting a till. The owner, Mr. Ramon, would slip me a paper bag with day-old muffins and say, "Eat, kid. Food is not a sin." I never argued with him, but I always ate the top first, like if I rationed the good part, I could make it last longer. I didn't date. I didn't go to parties. Gas wasn't free and laughter sounded like debt when it echoed in my head. On the rare nights I stayed late at a friend's place, my phone lit up with my mother's texts. "What time will you be home? We need you to be consistent." Inconsistent children are expensive. I don't think she knew how that last one read. I think she meant emotionally. But the word expensive was always the louder one. The first time they asked for rent, they called it a lesson. I was 16. My father slid an envelope across the table after dinner. It was blank except for my name and the amount, $200. First of each month, he said. It's symbolic. It teaches you the cost of living. It's not symbolic if you cash it, I said before I could stop myself. He tapped the pen on the envelope. You want to eat here, sleep here, use electricity here? Then make it concrete. My mother chimed in, soft. We'll put it toward the house. You'll thank us later. I paid it. I shut up. I started taking more shifts. Some months, when the bodega couldn't give me enough hours, I mowed lawns or carried drywall for a contractor who paid under the table and called me kiddo without irony. I stopped wearing my insole bank because the money never sat still long enough to hide. It moved from my hand to there so quickly it felt like bad magic. I got good at making myself useful. I fixed things. I found coupons. I ran spreadsheets in Google Docs for my father's budget, which he refused to follow but liked to point at. The night I showed him how I could predict the utility bill based on degree days and last year's usage, he blinked like I'd pulled a coin from his ear. You're good with numbers, he said, surprised. It wasn't praise so much as a note to self. That'll help when you're paying us back. Driving was a brief, bright thing. I got my license the day I turned 16, and 2 weeks later I found a junker for $800 that ran like a smoker with a cough. Mr. Ramon co-signed the insurance because my parents didn't want my risk on their policy. I paid the premiums. I paid for gas. And still, my father would drop $1 on the passenger seat when I drove him somewhere and say, mileage. It would have been funny if the white-knuckle grip in my chest hadn't been so practiced. By senior year, the horizon looked like a finish line I wasn't sure I'd be allowed to cross. Counselors talked about college. My mother talked about community college, so you can live at home and be reasonable. My father talked about trades. Plumbers make more than professors, and then switched mid-sentence to, as long as you can start paying us back. The phrase had stopped being tied to any particular milestone. It floated over everything like fog. I applied for scholarships in secret and in the open. My search history was a catalog of desperation. Full ride, low income, first gen, need-based deadlines, application fee waiver. I studied at the library because it was warm and quiet, and because texts from my mother had a way of making my eyes read words without seeing them. Pick up milk. Turn off lights in the basement. Your lunch meat is your responsibility. Don't forget to give Dad the rent. We're carrying you. I got into a state university with a decent scholarship. Not a full ride, but enough that, with federal aid and a little private loan, I could go if I lived lean. When the acceptance letter came, I stood in the driveway and read it 3 times. The sun was out. The mailbox squeaked on its hinge like it was trying to tell me something. I went inside and handed my mother the letter. She smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes fully, and said, "Wonderful. We'll need to talk about how you'll manage your responsibilities while you're gone." "I won't be here," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "There's housing. Housing is expensive." She set the letter down. "You can commute. We can't just replace your share." "My share," I repeated, like if I said it back it would make sense. My father came home early that day, which he never did unless something was about to go wrong. He read the letter, grunted, and said, "Proud of you." Then, without a beat, "We'll work out a system. Maybe you can send us a little each month to cover what we've been covering. Fair's fair." Fair. The word scraped. I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the carpet, a cheap beige that had been there longer than me. I traced the pattern with my toe and thought, over and over, like a metronome, I can't do 4 more years of this. Leaving was not cinematic. There was no backpack tied with rope, no thunderstorm. I waited until graduation. I shook hands, took photos, smiled with my lips closed so it wouldn't look like I was showing off. I packed in the nights, stuffing boxes with the speed of someone stealing from themselves. Mr. Ramon's nephew was moving out of a studio near campus and offered me a sublet. It smelled like old curry and paint thinner and possibility. I said yes. I told my parents 2 days before I left. My mother cried. Not the full-body sob that empties a person, but the kind of crying that looks good from a distance. "We're losing you," she said, "after everything we've poured into you." My father didn't yell. He put his hands on the back of a chair and leaned, like he was holding the house up with his palms. "You'll send something," he said. "You won't forget us." "I won't forget," I said, because that was true in the wrong way. The day I moved, my father stood by the car and watched me load boxes. He picked one up, grunted, set it down, as if to make a point about gravity. "We've kept track," he said quietly, almost to himself. "We're not asking for charity. Just what's right." "What's right?" I said. I had a check in my pocket, $200 for July rent, because I knew leaving without a last payment would set off alarms. I handed it to him. He took it, didn't meet my eyes, and tucked it into his back pocket like it might burn if he held it too long. I drove to the studio with my windows down. The air was hot and heavy. My chest felt like a new room, empty and echoing and a little scary. I unloaded with the kind of frantic energy that makes you drop things and laugh anyway. The mattress I'd bought used squeaked when I sat on it. The fridge hummed like the kitchen light at home, but softer. I plugged in a lamp, and for the first time, I flipped a switch and didn't flinch at the imagined cost. It was huge. I worked 2 jobs that first semester. Campus IT in the mornings, restaurant host at night. I did homework on breaks, drank coffee that tasted like pencil shavings, and learned the bus schedule like a second language. When my parents called, I answered every 3rd time, parceled out updates like ration cards. My mother would ask, "Are you eating?" And I'd say yes. My father would ask, "Any extra you can send?" And I'd say no, because there wasn't, and because something in me had started putting up a thin, transparent wall. They did not take the hint. Texts came in like bills, phone due, insurance due. "We covered you for 18 years. Don't forget who fed you." Sometimes my mother would send a photo, me, age 6, with a gap-toothed grin, and the caption, "We've loved you through everything. Don't harden your heart." It worked a little. I sent $50 once, then $75, then nothing for a while because the radiator broke and the landlord said, "Use the oven." I made lists. I lived on rice and eggs, and the bar's leftover salad if the cook liked me that night. My grades didn't slip, but my hands shook sometimes from caffeine and counting. I thought about dropping out once, sophomore winter, when the bodega closed and the restaurant cut staff, and my father left me a voicemail that started with "Son" and ended with "You owe us." I sat on the steps outside the library and watched my breath fog. A girl I didn't know sat next to me and lit a cigarette and didn't say anything. We shared a silent, smoke-free moment. I imagined walking back to the studio, packing the boxes, moving home, paying rent to my parents like a dutiful son. The thought made my stomach lurch like I'd swallowed a battery. I went inside and applied for 3 more campus jobs. I got through not because it got easier, but because I got stubborn. I built a skin over the part of me that panicked every time a message from home buzzed my pocket. I learned the difference between guilt that warns and guilt that waits you to the spot like wet clothes. I let the second kind drip off. I had to. I graduated in 3.5 years because time cost money. When I walked across the stage and touched the diploma, I felt the ledger shift, just a hair. Not erased, not even lighter, but the numbers started to move in my direction. I had interviews already. I had a suit that didn't quite fit and shoes that did. I had a plan, sharp and fragile, and a list of names of people who had said, "Call me." That summer, I got my first salaried job. The offer email made my hands go numb. It wasn't huge money, but it was money that came with benefits and a badge that opened doors. My parents sent a card with a cartoon graduation cap and a note from my mother in looping script. So proud. Remember what's right. My father added, "We knew you'd make good on it." On what? He didn't have to say. I put the card in a box. I put the box on a shelf. I opened a spreadsheet. And for the first time, I started a tab with my name at the top and columns that were mine alone. I still remember the first morning I woke up after signing the contract for that salaried job. The alarm went off, and for a second my body prepared for panic. Was I late for a shift? Did I miss class? Did I forget a rent envelope? Then it hit me. I had one job. One paycheck, regular. Direct deposit. Health insurance. Paid time off. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it spin, and thought, this is mine. It wasn't glamorous. Entry-level analyst at a mid-sized logistics firm. My desk was wedged between a printer that groaned like it was dying and a guy named Jeff who talked about CrossFit like it was a religion. But my name was on the email signature. My badge unlocked the building. On the first Friday, I checked my bank account 6 times just to see the numbers sitting there, stable, waiting for me. Not waiting for my father's pen, not waiting for my mother's commentary. Mine. That first year was survival mixed with slow-building confidence. I rented a one-bedroom with beige carpet and cabinets that smelled like old onions, but it was all mine. I bought groceries without bracing for a lecture. I bought a used couch from Craigslist and a TV that didn't buzz in the corners. On Sundays, I'd make pancakes, eat half, freeze the rest, and sit in silence, fork-tapping plate, wondering if this was what people meant by freedom. My parents, of course, didn't let go. The calls kept coming. "How's the job?" my mother would ask, then slide in. "Your father's car needs work. Groceries are expensive these days. You know, it would mean a lot if you sent something home." My father was blunter. "When are you going to start paying us back?" At first, I sent money. Not much, $100 here, $200 there. It was easier than the guilt that bloomed in my chest when my mother sighed about sacrifices. I told myself it was helping, that I could afford it. But every time I hit transfer, I felt smaller. Like I was still the kid with the Cheerios on the floor, cleaning up while my mother whispered about money, money, money. One night, about 6 months in, I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table with my laptop open. I had just sent them $150. My fridge buzzed in the corner, my rent was due, and I had $42 left until payday. My phone pinged with a text. "Thank you. Don't forget, this is just a start." My father. That word again. Start. I stared at it until my vision blurred. And then, without planning it, I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, and blocked the number. Heart hammering, palms sweating. I did the same for my mother's. Then email. Then Facebook. Then everything. I sat back, breath ragged, like I'd just jumped into cold water. For the first time, there was silence. No buzzing. No sighs. No reminders. Just me, the fridge hum, and the ceiling light. I didn't last long in that job. It was a stepping stone, and I knew it. But I worked hard, made myself useful, and learned the kind of things you don't get in textbooks. How to present without sweating through your shirt. How to sit in a meeting without looking like a terrified intern. How to build a model that made the VP nod. After 2 years, I leveraged the experience into a role at a startup. Double the pay. More chaos, more hours, but also more freedom to create. That's when my obsession with numbers turned into my edge. I could see inefficiencies other people didn't. I built dashboards, predicted costs, cut waste. My boss called me the guy who can smell dollars. I smiled but didn't explain why. If you grow up with parents who assign a price tag to every slice of bread, you learn to track costs like a second heartbeat. I lived lean. I didn't buy the fancy apartment, didn't splurge on the car. I saved, invested, tracked every cent in a spreadsheet that I updated daily. My friends joked I was married to Excel. I laughed with them, but inside, I knew the truth. The spreadsheet was the only thing that made the buzzing stop. 3 years later, I had enough to walk away. Not forever, but enough that the thought of losing my job didn't make me sick. I started freelancing on the side, small contracts, data cleanup, analysis for companies too messy to fix themselves. It grew faster than I expected. Soon, I was making more in weekends than in a week at the startup. I took the leap, left the job, and built my own consultancy. The first time a client paid me $10,000 for a project, I stared at the number until my eyes watered. 10,000. More than my parents had ever made in a month. Money I earned with my mind, not my body breaking, not my guilt dragged through a ledger. Just me, my laptop, and the skill I honed from years of being told I was too expensive to keep. I built a team, 2 contractors at first, then 4. I rented a small office not because I needed it, but because I wanted a space that was mine. Clean lines, plants, whiteboards covered in scribbles that made sense only to me. I hung no family photos. The walls stayed bare. By 26, I had paid off my student loans. By 27, I had a 6-figure savings cushion, retirement accounts, and investments that actually grew while I slept. I bought an apartment with high ceilings and big windows that looked out over the city. The silence there wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace. But here's the thing. Even with all the success, the ledger never left me. Every time I bought something, I heard my father's voice. That's 22 cents. Every time I flipped a light switch, I braced. Every time I cooked too much pasta, I saw my mother's face. Do you think food grows back? So I did what I always do. I put it in a spreadsheet. Not just my finances, my memories. I started writing down everything I remembered. The rent envelopes, the $84 in the sneaker, the symbolic $200, the birthday toasts. At first, I thought it was just a way to exorcise the voices. But as the list grew, an idea started forming. A dangerous, sharp idea. If they wanted repayment, maybe I could give it to them. Not in drips of guilt and shame. Not in checks that never felt enough. But in one final, exact, calculated payment. A settlement, once and for all. The thought made my stomach twist. It felt wrong. It felt right. I couldn't stop turning it over in my head. Love isn't supposed to be transactional. Parents aren't supposed to keep receipts. But mine did. And if that was the game they wanted, I was finally in a position to play it better than they ever could. The night the idea solidified, I sat at my kitchen island with a glass of whiskey and my laptop. The city lights blinked through the window. I opened a new tab in my spreadsheet, titled it Repayment Project, and typed the first line. Cost of raising a child estimated. For the first time in my life, I smiled when I thought about the ledger. Because this time, I was the one holding the pen. The spreadsheet started like a joke. Just me, whiskey, and a blank tab with Repayment Project typed at the top. I figured I'd poke at it, maybe run a few rough numbers, then abandon it once the absurdity sunk in. But that's not who I am. Numbers hook into me. Give me a problem with inputs and outputs, and I'll keep drilling until the formula balances. By the time the whiskey glass was empty, I had a rough framework. By the end of that week, it was a full-blown project. First step, base cost of raising a kid in the U.S. Easy enough. I found USDA reports, government data, and economic studies. According to the USDA, the average cost of raising a child to 18 hovered around $233,610, adjusted for inflation. But averages never tell the whole story. My parents weren't high spenders. They cut corners on everything from groceries to shoes. They reminded me often that we don't do extras. So I built a frugal household adjustment. I shaved 20% off the average numbers. New base, $186,888. Second step, custom adjustments. This part got personal. I remembered actual costs, the ones they weaponized in my face. I dug through old boxes of schoolwork and found a few crumpled receipts my mother had stuffed in folders, school pictures, field trips, textbooks. I still had the photocopy of my 9th grade report card they taped to the fridge. The back had a Staples receipt stapled to it. $14.99 for printer ink. We print for you, my father had said when he posted it like a warning. I itemized every single thing I could remember. Baseball cleats, denied. Track shoes, approved. Cost, $64, split into installments because they came from Walmart. Lunch money at $2. $25 a day, but I backed it down to $1.50 because I remembered how often they forgot to give it to me, and I scavenged fries from friends. School supplies, Halloween costumes, 2 homemade, 1 store-bought, and the calculator they gifted me for my 13th birthday with a reminder that we don't give toys. I didn't inflate anything. If I didn't have a solid number, I estimated low and rounded down. The point wasn't to punish. The point was to settle, fairly, mathematically. Third step, housing and utilities. This one took hours of research. I pulled census data for the county I grew up in. Average home size, average mortgage, cost per square foot. I calculated the portion of the house that could be attributed to me. My bedroom was maybe 12% of the home's square footage, so I assigned 12% of the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and utilities. I even factored in my excess usage of water and electricity based on the lectures burned into my memory. I built formulas. If average family of 3 spends X on electricity, then per person equals X/3, plus 10% light left on penalty. The irony wasn't lost on me. Fourth step, food. This one hit harder than I expected. I pulled USDA food plan estimates by year, adjusted for inflation. Low-cost plan, not the liberal one. I mapped each year of my life, ages 0 to 18. The numbers stared back at me like ghosts of old dinners where I was told, "Do you think this is free?" Fifth step, medical. My parents loved to remind me how much shots cost, how expensive braces were, even though I never got them, how the ER visit when I broke my arm was half a mortgage payment. I called the local hospital billing department, pretending to be a student doing research, and got average charges for pediatric ER visits in the early 2000s. I plugged them in, subtracted insurance coverage, rounded down. By the time I was done, I had a 19-year timeline, birth to the day I moved out. Each year had line items: food, housing, clothing, education, medical, transportation. Every single category had citations, sources, or receipts. I built graphs. I made pivot tables. It was the cleanest, most airtight accounting of my life's cost anyone could ask for. Final number, $147,328. 64, lower than the national average. Lower than even my conservative estimate. But solid. Defensible. The number burned into me. I stared at it for a long time. A part of me thought, this is insane. Who does this? Who calculates their childhood down to the cent? But another part of me, the bigger part, felt something new. Calm. For once, the ledger was mine. I added one last column. Repayment adjustment. $0 for love. Because love was supposed to cancel the debt. And they never offered it without strings. I typed it in bold, italic, red. A joke only I would see. Now came logistics. I didn't want to hand them a check. A check could be refused, ripped up, waved in my face later. I wanted undeniable finality. So I set up a bank transfer. I opened a new account at their bank, linked it, tested it with a $1 deposit to myself. Worked flawlessly. I drafted the transfer note. Debt repaid. Nothing else. No explanation, no flourish. Just the words they drilled into me. Settle. Repay. Debt. But I didn't hit send right away. I sat on it for months. I kept refining the spreadsheet, running the numbers again like I was preparing for trial. I wanted no cracks, no you forgot this, or what about that. Every time doubt crept in, I'd open the sheet, scroll through the meticulous columns, and feel the weight in my chest loosen. During those months, my parents tried again. My mother left voicemails. "We miss you. It would mean so much to hear from you." My father emailed once. "We carried you for 18 years. Don't forget your duty." I didn't respond, but each message hardened the resolve. The day I knew I was ready, I bought a bottle of good whiskey, not the cheap stuff I used to sip while building the sheet, but a single malt that smelled like smoke and oak. I poured a glass, pulled up the transfer page, and entered the exact figure, $147,328. 64. The number looked strange in the text box, like a secret code. Before I clicked submit, I attached the note. Debt repaid. My hand hovered over the mouse. For a moment, I heard them both in my head, my father tapping the pen, my mother whispering, "We've put so much into you." I closed my eyes, breathed out, and clicked. Transaction complete. And just like that, 18 years of debt, real, imagined, forced, weaponized, left my account. I sat back, sipped the whiskey, and smiled. For the first time, I wasn't the one who owed. The transfer cleared faster than I expected. By the next morning, my bank app showed the debit, neat and clean. $147,328. 64, no drama, just a subtraction. My balance was still healthy. Years of discipline had made sure of that, but the number glared like a scar. I sat with my coffee, staring at it, half expecting lightning to strike, alarms to blare, some cosmic acknowledgement that a transaction like this carried weight beyond digits. But nothing happened. The world kept turning. My neighbors walked their dogs. The barista spelled my name wrong again. Business as usual. The first ping came at noon. My father. Voicemail. "What the hell is this? Did you just send us? Are you serious? Debt repaid? You think this covers it? You think you can wash your hands with a number? Call me back." I didn't. 2 hours later, my mother called. Her voice was different. Softer, pleading. "Honey, We saw the transfer. This is too much. Why would you do this? We never asked for this, not like this. You know we just wanted you to remember us, to share the load. This feels cruel. Please call us. I almost laughed. Never asked for this. My entire childhood was a masterclass in asking without asking. Every sigh, every ledger, every birthday toast. But now that I'd given them exactly what they claimed they wanted, it was too much. The emails followed. My father sent a spreadsheet. Yes, an actual spreadsheet, trying to tally missed interest. He had calculated that, if I'd paid them monthly since turning 18, with a conservative 4% annual interest rate, I'd owe them another $23,000. He signed it. This isn't settled. You know what's right. My mother's email came at midnight. The subject line was just, please. The body. We don't care about the money. We care about you. You can't put a price on family. This makes us feel like strangers. Was it really all about debt to you? Haven't we loved you? Haven't we done enough? That one stung, because she knew exactly where to twist the knife. But the thing is, love isn't something you attach to a bill. If it comes stapled to an invoice, it isn't love, it's leverage. The next morning, I blocked them both. Phone, email, everything. I even called the bank and had them mark the transfer account as closed so nothing could come back through it. One note, one payment, and silence. For the first week, it felt like withdrawal. My phone stayed quiet, but my brain supplied the missing noise. I kept expecting a call, a text, a guilt trip sliding under the door like smoke. I'd glance at my inbox and brace for an explosion. But every time, nothing. Just spam, client updates, newsletters I forgot to unsubscribe from. I thought maybe they'd show up in person. That's the kind of stunt my father might pull. I pictured him standing outside my building, tapping the hood of his car like he used to tap that damned pen. But he never came. Neither did she. Maybe they knew better, or maybe they realized they had no hooks left. Instead, silence stretched. And in that silence, I started to breathe differently. I'd sit at my desk with my coffee and my spreadsheets, and for the first time, there wasn't a voice in the back of my mind tallying every bite of food, every flipped switch. I bought new shoes without imagining my mother holding up the old ones, saying, "You walk through money." I left a light on overnight once, and when I woke up to it glowing, I laughed. Laughed, like it was just a bulb, not a sin. Work thrived. My consultancy landed its biggest contract yet, a 6-month engagement with a national retailer drowning in bad data. The kind of project that meant stability, growth, prestige. I threw myself into it with a sharpness I didn't know I had. Without their voices buzzing in my head, I had more space. Space to think, to create, to expand. My friends noticed the change before I did. "You're lighter," one said over drinks. "Like you finally put something down." I didn't tell them what. It's not the kind of story you drop between appetizers and a second round. Oh, I just settled an 18-year-old debt to my parents, blocked them, and now I'm free. Doesn't exactly land well in casual conversation. But I knew. I felt it in my shoulders, in the way my jaw unclenched when I fell asleep. A month after the transfer, I checked the closed account one last time. Final balance, $0. No returns, no disputes, no clawbacks. Just zero. Clean. And in that zero, I finally saw it, the end of the ledger. My parents always wanted everything to be transactional. Fine. I gave them the transaction to end all transactions. Exact. Calculated. Defensible. Now there was nothing left for them to hold over me. And without their ledger, I didn't owe them anything, not even anger. For the first time, I was truly free. Silence has a texture. That's what I learned in the months after I hit transfer. It's not just absence of noise. It's weight, space, air you can stretch your arms in. My apartment sounded different. The hum of the fridge, the faint city traffic, the buzz of my monitor, those were just background. The silence was what wrapped around me. For the first time, it wasn't the silence before a sigh or a demand. It was just mine. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I'd come home from meetings, drop my keys on the counter, and wait for the familiar spike of anxiety. Check phone, brace for guilt. Nothing. My phone sat there, mute. It took weeks before my body stopped twitching at every vibration, stopped expecting to see dad, or mom, or one of those endless little guilt-loaded texts. The habits ran deep, though. Grocery shopping was weirdly the hardest. I'd pick up a pack of chicken breasts and hear my father's voice in my head. "Do you think this is free?" I'd reach for bread and feel my mother's whisper. "Money, money, money." For years, I'd stood in grocery aisles breaking down cost per ounce in my head, punishing myself if I chose anything but the cheapest. So I tried something radical. I bought without counting. The first time, it It was strawberries. Out of season, expensive, pointless. I put them in my basket, swiped my card, and waited for guilt to gnaw at me. It didn't. I took them home, washed them, ate them straight from the bowl, juice on my fingers, and thought, this is what freedom tastes like. Sweet, messy, unnecessary, and mine. Other things followed. A new pair of running shoes, not the clearance rack, but the pair that actually fit. A lamp for the corner of the living room that glowed warm instead of glaring white. A trip with friends to the coast where we stayed in an Airbnb and split the cost without me calculating my portion to the cent. Each time, I braced for the old reflex, ledger, guilt. Oh us, but it never came. Work changed, too. Before, I worked like I was running from something. Every dollar I earned felt like proof that I could outrun the debt. After the transfer, after the block, work felt lighter, not easier. I still pushed myself, still chased contracts and built models. But the drive was different. Less desperation, more creation. I expanded the consultancy. Hired 2 full-time analysts, then 3. Rented a bigger office with floor-to-ceiling windows and let the light in. Clients came through referrals, word of mouth, LinkedIn connections I never thought would pan out. Every time I landed a new deal, I thought, this is mine, not this proves I don't owe them anymore. My friends noticed the difference before I fully did. You seem calm, one said over coffee. Another, you laugh more now. I hadn't realized how little I used to laugh. Laughter in my parents' house always had edges. Someone had to be the butt of the joke, and usually it was me. But now, sitting in my own life, laughter came without calculation. I also started therapy. Not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand what I'd been carrying. The first session, I told the therapist, my parents raised me like I was alone. She tilted her head, scribbled something, and said, and you repaid it? Down to the cent, I said. She nodded slowly. So what do you owe now? That question hung in the air like smoke. I sat with it for weeks. What do I owe now? To myself, maybe. To live without the ledger. To let love, when it comes, not feel like a transaction. I tested myself in small ways. When a contractor missed a deadline, instead of docking pay like my father would have, I talked with them, restructured the workflow, gave them another shot. They delivered. When a friend forgot their wallet at dinner, I paid without saying, you owe me. It felt strange, like learning to walk without a limp, but also natural, like this was how it was always supposed to be. The only ghost that lingered was birthdays. Every year, when the date rolled around, I'd half expect a card in the mail, some pointed reminder. But nothing came. The first birthday without them was strange, quiet, unmarked. My friends took me out for dinner, sang too loud, brought a cake with my name scrawled crooked in icing. It was messy, imperfect, warm. I realized then that birthdays didn't have to be about owing gratitude for survival. They could just be about joy. I traveled for the first time, really traveled. Flew overseas, something my parents used to scoff at as throwing money into the sky. I stood in a crowded street market in Lisbon, ate pastéis de nata, and laughed to myself at the absurdity of it. Throwing money into the sky had bought me sun, salt, air, sugar, freedom. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about them. Not with anger, not with longing. Just curiosity. Did they spend the money? Did they argue about it? Did they sit at their kitchen table, legal pad in hand, and tally it up, wondering if it was enough? I'll never know. And I realized I didn't need to. That's the point of closure. You stop needing answers. By the end of that year, I felt a shift deep inside. For almost 2 decades, my identity had been shaped by being the debt. Every choice, every thought, filtered through what I owed. Now, with the ledger closed, I had space to ask a question I'd never dared. Who am I without debt? The answer wasn't instant. It unfolded slowly, in the taste of strawberries, in the warmth of a lamp, in the laughter with friends, in the quiet of my apartment. In the projects I built, the clients I helped, the life I shaped without a pen tapping in the background. Freedom, I learned, isn't fireworks. It's silence. It's peace. It's walking into a grocery store, picking up what you want, and leaving without guilt. It's knowing no one is keeping score but you, and you've decided the game is over. When I look back now, I don't see a childhood. I see a balance sheet. Every memory has a number attached. Cheerios, 22 cents. A field trip, $48. A birthday toast, paid with interest. It's like my parents branded my skin with invisible receipts, line items I couldn't wash off. For years, I thought the only way to survive was to keep paying, keep shrinking myself, keep proving I wasn't the burden they said I was. And then I did the unthinkable. I paid it all. Not out of guilt anymore, but out of precision. I turned their weapon into my own tool. I ran the numbers, double-checked the math, and sent the exact figure. No padding, no extras, no tip for service. Just what they said I owed. Debt repaid. At first, I thought the revenge was the money. Watching that transfer go through, seeing the clean subtraction, it felt sharp, cathartic. But that wasn't the real closure. The real closure came after, in the silence. In the nothing. In the fact that, for once, there was no follow-up, no running tab, no pin tapping on a legal pad. I think that's what they never understood. Love is not a ledger. You can't invoice affection. You can't demand repayment for raising a child. Parenting is not a loan. But they wanted it to be one, and I gave them what they asked for. Exactly, mathematically, legally. The debt is closed, the account zeroed. And without the debt, their claim on me evaporated. I don't hate them. That surprises some people when I admit it, even in therapy. Hate is heavy, and I've carried enough weight. What I feel now is distance. They're a story I lived through, a system I outgrew. They built my obsession with numbers, sure, but I built the life. I built the freedom. They no longer get credit for that. Sometimes, I imagine them opening their bank account that day, seeing 6 figures drop in, and not knowing what to do. Did my father grin like he'd won? Did my mother cry? Did they argue about whether to spend it or save it? Did they realize the note, debt repaid, wasn't gratitude but a goodbye? I'll never know. And that's the cleanest part. I don't need to. Because the truth is, the moment I blocked them, the transaction became more than financial. It was emotional bankruptcy, me declaring that their ledger had no jurisdiction here anymore. They don't get to audit my life. They don't get to tally my worth. The most liberating thing I've ever done wasn't wiring $147,328.64. It was making the decision to walk away after. To not chase their approval. To not explain myself. To not reopen the account with words or excuses. To leave the silence intact. Now, at 28, my life is mine in a way I never thought possible when I was 14 hiding $84 in my sneakers. I have a home that's warm without lectures, food that tastes like freedom, work that thrives because it's fueled by choice, not fear. I have friendships rooted in laughter, not transactions. I have mornings where I drink coffee and listen to nothing but the hum of the city, no voices tallying costs in my ear. And most importantly, I have proof, in my own bones, that love doesn't need a receipt. When I think about the word settle, I remember how my parents used to use it, like a threat, a promise that one day I'd balance their books. Now, settle means something entirely different to me. It means peace. Settled, like dust after a storm. Settled, like roots in soil that's finally my own. Settled, like sitting on my couch with a glass of whiskey, knowing there's no debt hanging over me anymore. The best revenge wasn't the money. The best revenge was giving them exactly what they demanded, and then refusing to give them anything more. Not my guilt, not my attention, not my life. Debt repaid. Door closed. Silence kept. That's my freedom.